Hi, I am Jay Richards, a senior fellow at the Discovery Institute, and we are here at the COSM Technology Summit in beautiful Bellevue, Washington, 2023. And I'm joined by a long-term friend, mentor, co-conspirator, Bill Dembski. Bill, in fact, if anyone is responsible for getting me to the Discovery Institute way back in 1998, it was actually Bill Dembski. He's gone on to write on a number of very important and controversial issues. He's also been a contributor to the Discovery Institute in its newer program, the Bradley Center for Natural and Artificial Intelligence, which is apropos because this year at COSM, we're talking about artificial intelligence. And Bill is going to be speaking on a panel here at the conference about the strengths and limitations of AI, but I'll let him describe that. Bill, good to see you.
Good to see you, Jay.
Yeah, I'm crazy. Yeah. I was trying to run the numbers. I'm thinking that's about 25 years since I moved from New Jersey out here to start a Discovery when we were
students together at Princeton Seminary.
Yeah, we were very young men then, for sure. Well, so this panel deals with an issue that you've been thinking about and writing about actually is, I think, almost as long as I've known you, which is artificial intelligence. First of all, say a little bit about what you think the limits are of artificial intelligence. Of course, here in 2023, there's sort of a boom and bust cycle in terms of the hype for AI. At the moment, I think we're in a boom cycle. But if you had to distill down what you think the limits are, what would you say?
Yeah, well, it seems that it's apropos that we have the Walter Bradley Center for Natural and Artificial Intelligence, and it seems that natural intelligence, which mainly is human intelligence, I would want to argue that it's fundamentally different from artificial intelligence. So I've been following this field well over 40 years now, and the thing is, with something like ChatGPT 4 and these large language models, it's impressive what they can do, but I think it seems that there's still some just fundamental limitations on what these artificial intelligence programs are going to be able to accomplish. So that puts me, at odds with the singularity folks, those who really want to see this, see computers match and then exceed humans in their intelligent capabilities, But I think you're a philosopher, I'm a philosopher, so I think there are lots of sort of basic concerns. What's qualia? What does does something feel like? One problem that I found with ChatGPT 4 is it'll just make stuff up.
Oh yeah.
It's not a requirement in epistemology that you know something. You can know things without knowing that you know it. But it does seem to be a problem when you don't know, when you don't know that you don't know something,
That's right.
Or when you think you know something when you don't, and that's a problem that I find there. So just understanding consciousness, all these basic questions, all the sorts of things that have been raised about artificial intelligence, it doesn't seem to me that they've gone away. But on the other hand, the technology, it is, I would say, ChatGPT 4. Large language models, it's the most exciting development that I've seen in artificial intelligence, and I followed it. I sat in on my first artificial intelligence class in 1981, and so and at that time, it's interesting. One of the things, our first assignment was to write an ELIZA program, which is basically, a very primitive chat program.
This is in 81.
This is in 81.
Wow. Okay.
This goes back to Weizenbaum, who had done this much earlier. Basically imitate what he was doing. But at that time, it was using pattern matchers with language, grammars, and basically what you'd do is somebody would say something. You were trying to imitate a Rogerian therapist, so you just kind of mirror back to the person.
Not that complicated.
So you just take the language, I feel sad today.
Are you saying you feel sad?
Did you feel sad yesterday? Or something, or then I remember the guy who was teaching it. His name was Laurent Ciclossi. He said, so just have a few options, so that you can respond. And if there's no pattern that's matched, simply have it respond. The computer, I understand.
That's it. So if you lower
deeply cynical.
It is deeply cynical. Absolutely. If that's all the Turing test required, it'd be a very low bar indeed. So. Well, you wrote a piece fairly recently in Mind Matters, which is the sort of online site of the Bradley Center, talking actually about your experience with ChatGPT and another of these AI bots that most of us are now familiar with. In fact, and I use them. I use them for research. I would never use them to sort of tell me how to write something, but they're actually really useful for coming up with bibliography. And you devised a sort of riddle that I thought was quite telling. Summarize what you did.
Well, okay, I think we're talking about the same thing, but I've been hammering ChatGPT and writing a bunch of stuff. But if I'm thinking of the right one, let me give you a little context.
Okay.
So I was a grad student in 1984 at University of Chicago, and there was this acquaintance who would ply me with riddles and things. And so the way he posed it to me initially was somebody walks into a bar, the bartender pulls out a gun, says, "Get out of here." The guy looks up, startled, and says, "Thank you," and walks away. Okay, so this can be about a Kafkaesque story.
Sure.
It doesn't make any sense, but how could you make sense of it? And the way you make sense of it is I can give you one word: hiccups. Okay, so the idea is he walks in, he's got the hiccups, the bartender pulls out the gun and scares the hiccups out of him. He's startled. The hiccups are gone, and he thanks him and walks away. Okay?
Yeah.
So basically, I took that story but elaborated it.
Okay.
So it was, Fred is a concert pianist who plays Liszt and Brahms, but when he comes to his hometown, he stops by at his friend Joe's honky tonk and plays boogie woogie, and so I just. And
add a lot of detail.
I added the detail in part because I was also thinking, will the detail confuse? And it's going to have the program is ChatGPT 4 is going to need to get through when its way through it. And so then I said, at one point, Fred he has to stop playing. He can't continue playing. Joe takes out a gun, holds it to his temple, and says, "I'm going to kill you." Fred looks up, says, "Thank you," and the crowd is looking on. Also, Fred says, "Thank you." The crowd is all happy, and they get back to playing the music and so on. Okay. So it's so if you know hiccups, then you can make sense out of the story. But the idea was to give ChatGPT. It's an inference to the best explanation, but also to come up with the hypothesis. It's one thing if you say, here's something that needs to be explained, and here are 4 possible hypotheses.
Sure.
Pick the best one. Okay.
In this case, you just had this bare data. Give us the hypothesis.
Yeah, it's kind of like Daniel with Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar wants not only the interpretation of the dream, but tell me the dream. Because if you can tell me the dream, then you...
I know something. Yeah, you know something. Yeah.
So that was the idea, and... and then it got back though, and it was thoughtful, and I compared it with Bard, for instance.
That's
Bard was just totally.
It seemed like clueless. It was bluffing. I mean, this is the reality is when I read, and this was before you mentioned hiccup, right? So you give the scenario without hiccup. That's crucial. Both Bard and ChatGPT.
Yeah. Bard was just flailing.
Yeah.
But ChatGPT was saying, well, it could be that he has some medical condition, and that the gun kind of, just jars him out of that.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's interesting. But if it's a medical condition, it doesn't account for everything. So why is the crowd so happy when he's, and they're not, they're fine with what's pulling out the gun. So then I said, well, it's because you have conversations with these chatbots, and I said, what if I added the word hiccup? Does that give you any insight? He says, oh yeah, this actually makes for, it didn't say better explanation, but that was the gist of it.
Yes.
This makes sense out of things that the other explanation
sort of constrain the possibilities, right? Yeah.
So it was, to me, that was very impressive.
Absolutely.
And so to say, because I know there's, at some level, I think I take John Searle's Chinese room experiments seriously. I think there isn't real understanding there, and yet there is this semblance of understanding, which is pretty good.
It's impressive.
It's
no,
impressive.
Exactly, and that's what. Though I remember, I think maybe just the right age to have sort of started high school and college before we really had. I had Ataris and things like this, but. It went through the Ask Jeeves phase, right, and various kind of search engines, and then had Google, right, and remember that moment and how magical Google was. But I had absolutely no temptation to think, okay, Google's hired hired a bunch of engineers in California that are sort of answering questions. And so that's what, in this case too, for me, it's just like, okay, what is this thing actually capable of? But there's no temptation to think, oh, okay, now suddenly we have an agent. To me, it's sort of an empirical, it's an empirical question how much, these sort of things can do. I don't think any of them, at least at the moment, sort of bear in any way on this kind of question of agency and consciousness and qualia, as you said. But do you think, I'm trying to think, maybe 15 years ago, I thought, okay, natural language is going to be a massive, massive hurdle. And yet now Google Translate's actually pretty darn good, you know? And so is your sense that we're sort of in an impressive upsurge with these chatbots?
Yeah, I mean, of course, and it does seem to, I mean, there were these things that just seemed insuperable. For instance, these Winograd schemas, where you have a reference, what is it? The police had to quell the demonstrators. Anyway, I have these things usually at my fingertips. But anyway, it's you have two possible reference, and it depends on. And then you have a pronoun which refers to one or the other, and which one it refers to depends on the meaning. So let me see let's see if I can do this, because I'm on the spot here. The city council denied the permit request for a protest to the protesters because they threatened violence. Okay, well, they threatened violence would be the protesters. But if instead of they threatened violence because they feared violence, then it would be
the police,
the police or the council. So so that was a fundamental problem with these Winograd schemas, determining what the referent was for these pronouns, because it was the syntactics are the same.
Right.
So it's the semantics that's doing it, and it's getting it, So one of the things I was doing with ChatGPT was just trying to break it, and early on it was having problems with these Winograd schemas. You've got to go with ChatGPT 4. If you go 3.5, I've had somebody who's works in these areas, and it was like, hey, it can't do the Winograd schemas. Well, do it with ChatGPT
upgrade,
4. Upgrade, But I can, if I do 3 or sometimes 4 reference, but 3. I was able to confuse it a bit, but it still wasn't bad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering, because I remember, was it 2011 when IBM's Watson beat the 2 reigning human champions at Jeopardy? That it was very impressive, but when it made mistakes, it made the kinds of mistakes that no human would make, just weird kind of things. And I noticed this with the chatbots, is that it can do some amazing things, but then it will just hallucinate bizarre things that no human would ever do. And so I'm wondering if that the ways in which they make mistakes is perhaps the sort of key to seeing, okay, the different way in which whatever they're doing is from the way humans do it.
I wonder also to what degree you may have some sort of hybridization, where maybe you give it just some, Steve Wolfram is going to be here, so just give it some math capabilities, and just say, okay, it's you put in a request, a query, but now it's saying, oh, wait a second, my large language model doesn't really handle that so well, so let me just
move over here,
move it off to a version of Mathematica. I don't know, can you make things more powerful that way? Because I mean, just sequence completions, it's just terrible on that. I mean, they can be quite simple, it's like just numbers, and just say, give it several numbers and then say, okay, what's the next number? What's the next block of 5 numbers? And it's usually it's just clueless there. So, I make it this game to see if I can break it. And there's still ways to break it, But it's if you're not suspecting, I think this thing can pass a Turing test at this point.
Yeah, well, and I do think that what the Turing test differs over time. It's very time relative. If you gave someone a Google search in 1950 out of context, it probably would. And so this is my suspicion, is that we will ourselves adapt and become much more adept at recognizing the difference between the things these machines do and the things humans do. But that we shouldn't just sort of predict ahead of time, okay, that's never going to be able to accomplish this. That seems like a mistake.
Well, yeah, but I mean, up until this, I thought this might be forever a problem. And even natural language, I mean, you know, it seems to have a lot of good facility that can translate. You know, I know German. You know, I think I've had to do some German translation.
Yes.
And, you know, it's impressive.
It is.
And you know, I mean, one of the things I'll do sometimes is I'll just have it rewrite stuff. You know, and I can even say rewrite it in the style of Ernest Hemingway if I want it tight. You know, concise, and you know, it'll do it.
It'll do it.
I can take long articles, or longish articles. In newspapers, I don't want to spend a lot of time. You know, just punch it in there, give it to me in 2 paragraphs.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah,
So
that's. I think it's the right attitude. It's a tool. I have a friend who is French, but now American and lives in the United States, that has partially made a living translating books in English, you know, from French into English, and he's now run some of these things through, and he realizes, he said, Jay, it's 95% of the way there. I mean, I still maybe have to do some cleanup for 5%, but this is going to destroy lots of jobs. All these people doing this. I said, yeah, that's right. It doesn't mean there's not going to be anything left to do, but that's probably not going to be something that we're going to do longhand in the future. Yeah.
Well, and I was talking to a programmer, a friend, and he's now using something called Copilot, and he's saying, where basically it'll anticipate what when he's coding, you know, what the next several lines of code are going to be. He says a lot of times he has to just get rid of it, but he's saying he's seeing about a 30% increase in efficiency for him. So which is significant.
No, it really is.
But you know, in a sense, you know, I think to myself, you know, how, and you had this experience because I mean you're a pre-internet guy. I mean you started doing your student days. I mean, just think about going to a library, you know, and having to track down a journal. I remember for design inference there was something on you know, about French court case, and I didn't have access to it. It was actually near the University of Dallas. They didn't have the journal, so I had to go down to Southern Methodist University to use their library to find this thing. You know, that's, you know, it's half a day.
It is,
you know,
and not of great comparative advantage in terms of the value of your time.
Yeah, I mean, you're not benefiting. I mean, intellectually, it's grunge work, you know. But you can, you know, if you can have all this knowledge at your fingertips, I think it just saves an awful lot. And I remember having a conversation with James Tour a few years back where he described, I mean, his students that it seemed that because they had access to so much online information, it did force him actually to have to raise his game because you know, a lot of the pat answers were already out there. So you know, I think it'll be interesting. Will it make us better in some ways? You know, I think of a game of chess, for instance. I mean, I think when Bobby Fischer was grandmaster, it was about 200 grandmasters worldwide. Now it's about 1,700 to 2,000. And you know, it seems to me the level of play has probably just gotten stronger. And having those machines that can, you know, work against you or work for you in some ways, you know, iron sharpens iron. And,
absolutely.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, in some ways, I think it can make us better. In some ways, you know, though, it can make us probably lazy. You know? And I think this was a concern. I think even when writing came out, that, you know, oral traditions would go by the way.
Socrates apparently complained of this. So I mean, that's the reality of technology. I do think it's helpful to be able to just be sort of content and philosophical and say, okay, let's see what this stuff can do. If on philosophical grounds you think Skynet is not going to wake up, that's not what's happening here. I think it helps if you're terrified about that. I think that can instill some fear in people, and so that, you know, I think it's important to bring these kind of philosophical distinctions to bear on this question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see Skynet becoming conscious, but I do wonder to the degree that, you know, surveillance technology is used and then sees patterns in our behaviors, knows us better than we know ourselves, you know, and then just says, you're going in a direction we don't want you going in. This is, and then, just assaults on freedom.
Yeah, just little nudges. I think that's the thing to worry about.
Yeah.
But that's, of course, that's the people in charge, the people programming. That's what I spend my time worrying about. Bill, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's so
been
fun.
A pleasure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Looking forward to your panel here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. We are here at COSM 2023 in Bellevue, Washington. I'm Jay Richards.